Hi everyone and welcome back to the channel. I'm Kirsty and this is Stuck in the Mud. Thanks everyone for watching my videos. I hope you're finding them helpful. If you are, please remember to like the videos if you want me to continue making them. And if you're not subscribed, why not? It's free and hopefully together we can build a bigger OCD and anxiety community that can be there for each other and help each other heal. In today's video, I'm talking about 10 things that actually make your OCD and anxiety worse. Number one is lack of sleep. Sleep hygiene is a really big thing for me with my history with OCD and anxiety. I'm always aware that my OCD is worse, my intrusive thoughts are worse, my compulsions are worse, my anxious thoughts, my panic is always much higher when I don't have enough sleep. And this is always a bit of a difficult thing for me because I'm actually quite a night owl. So when it comes to going to bed early, I'm not so good at that. And I have to be quite strict with myself sometimes to remember that and be aware that and mindful that to actually be the best and be in the best place I can possibly be and have a better mood all round is to actually get more sleep. And I have heard before that having more sleep before midnight is actually kind of doubles up, because the more sleep you have before midnight, I think every hour makes up supposedly 2 hour sleep and rest time, which is quite an interesting thing because I'm more often than not going to bed at midnight or later. And especially when my children are in school, I can be rushing around very early in the morning. And if I've not been to bed early enough the night before, it's usually a bad recipe for intrusive thoughts, anxiety. The OCD symptoms are usually on the rise when these things happen. Not always, but it's more likely to happen in my case. And I think that's probably goes for most people that suffer from OCD and anxiety. And I've never had a real problem with getting off to sleep. Now, that has never been really my thing. I've always fallen asleep quite easily. Apart from when I'm going through really rough times with my OCD, I will find sometimes then that I struggle because my mind's so active and, my nervous system's so overstimulated that I find sometimes it's hard to switch off and go to sleep. But that is generally when I'm going through a really bad time and I've had to take medication to help me fall asleep. But generally that is not an issue of mine. I've always enjoyed sleep. I fall asleep quite easily. I have restful sleep on the whole. So it's never been a big problem for me, but I do know that when I don't have enough of it, that those rising symptoms are likely to happen for me. And I think for most people. So it's just being mindful of the fact to maybe take an earlier night to sleep, maybe try and find something relaxing before you go to sleep. I have done certain meditations in the past, and maybe even just listening to music you enjoy. People sometimes find that they can fall asleep quicker. Some people like to read a book before bed, just something relaxing that might make you go to sleep easier. So it's just finding the thing that works for you really. But these things are important because sleep can have a major impact on OCD and anxiety. Number two is social media. Now, this is a real big problem, I think, in today's day and age. The digital world we live in, and we're exposed to so many triggers online, and they're at our fingertips now. And we sometimes feel it's hard to escape. Whether it's news, the world news, anything happening out there, or just people having their own opinion on things and maybe triggering for you. Some people will have ideas that don't resonate well with somebody with OCD, and the way they talk about it is not good for someone that's suffering with their mental health. And I think because we're so overly exposed now, it's it's very hard to escape it. So sometimes I have in my life had to take social media breaks. So whether that's platforms like Facebook or YouTube, I've had to restrict how much time I spend on them. If sometimes I've even completely deactivated my account just to have that time away. And I have noticed that my overall mood has been better, my OCD, my anxiety. So sometimes I think, depending on what place we are mentally, that those things can really impact us. And then other times I can be triggered by things and, use that as an opportunity to actually use the work that I've learned for my OCD and anxiety and actually not involve myself in these things, because I can see triggering headlines or articles all day long online. And I don't have to read them, I don't have to. Or I could use that as an opportunity to maybe read something and not be triggered the same way, let those thoughts be there. Don't get so caught up in it myself. Number 3 is change. I've never been good with change. And I think that probably goes for, most people. Nobody really likes change. It's uncomfortable for most people. But I think when you suffer from OCD and anxiety, it can be more noticeable for you. So going through changes, whether that be, it could involve getting married, it could be a divorce, maybe your, immigration to another country, it could mean going to college, changing schools, going to university. Maybe you're even changing your job or moving home. These are big changes in your life, even pregnancy, these are all changes. And once we go through these things as an OCD sufferer, an anxiety sufferer, these can spike huge emotions within us. And I've always said I'm not good with change. But once we become aware of that and we really, give ourselves that self-compassion when we're going through a major change in life, we can be more kinder to ourselves. I think that's where a lot of my healing with OCD has come from, because I'm a lot more compassionate with myself now. Because, we can often hear people go, well, it's just doing this, you're just changing your job, you'll get used to it. And that's fine. But these are all big things for us, and big changes take time, time to get used to and actually feel comfortable with. So if we can be a lot more compassionate with ourselves, then going through these big life-changing things can actually make the transition a lot calmer and stable. So just bear that in mind. We need to be much kinder with ourselves. Number 4 is stress. Now, stress is a big thing when it comes to OCD and anxiety. When I've ever gone through a big life event or, something very stressful that, we have so many emotions with, I do find a major increase in my OCD. I've gone through times when maybe a loved one was ill, job loss, these are all stressful situations, financial troubles. I've gone through a lot of these things recently, in recent times, and I have noticed around those times that, my intrusive thoughts, my OCD, the compulsions, they all increase, and it can be devastating because you're actually going through a really rough time, personally. And then you're on top of everything else, you've got OCD and anxiety to contend with. And it can feel so overwhelming at times when you're going through a period in your life like this. And that's somewhere I've found myself quite recently. I've been dealing with, myself, financial problems and, work problems. And it just compounds itself, and it's just so intense at times, and it can get so stressful that you find you're in a place where you do see a spike in intrusive thoughts, you do see a spike in all those OCD symptoms and uncomfortable emotions, your anxiety and your panic and your guilt and shame and all these really awful things we go through with OCD and anxiety, and I will feel a lot of frustration, and it's a difficult thing because stress is inevitable, in life. We do go through stressful times, but I suppose it's just looking at them differently and trying to kind of reevaluate everything. Yes, money, we need money to get by in life and things like this, and these things don't go away, but at the cost of your health. It's not, it really, it's not that valuable, when you compare it to things like your health and your mental health. It's, although yes, those things are needed, I'm not trying to say they're not, because clearly they are, but sometimes it's just not worth going through things like that to actually implicate you with your health, your mental health. It's just, it isn't, you can't compare the two. So it's difficult, and it's just, again, being mindful when you're going through a stressful time that you're aware of the fact you may see a spike in your OCD and anxiety. And that has helped me in the past when going through a difficult time, and especially when I lost my mum as well, just being aware that the fact that this is a stressful time in my life, and again, having that compassion for yourself, that, showing that kindness to yourself that you would to others. That's the thing. I think as an OCD sufferer, like I said, you're very empathetic, and, you'd show that compassion to someone else, but showing that compassion to yourself as well has been a major part of my healing journey. The next one is hormones. This is quite a personal one to me. I have had definite changes with my mental health, especially in the premenstrual time of my period, and I've definitely seen an increase in symptoms of my OCD and anxiety. And this is something I brought up with my therapist because, it was a regular occurrence. I was noticing it, and there was a pattern to it. And I think, specialists, doctors are becoming much more aware of the fact how our hormones can impact our mental health. And for me, I noticed it every month. I noticed that, a few days before my period, that I would see an increase in intrusive thoughts and maybe compulsive behavior, maybe doing rituals and things like that. So there is a link, and my therapist did actually say that, she'd seen this across many of her female patients. But it's not just females, this happens to men as well. Men will see fluctuations with their hormones, and, lower estrogen levels are apparent in both men and women, and they will see an increase in OCD symptoms with lower estrogen levels, and that's for men and women, because men have estrogen too in lower levels. So that's an interesting piece of information that I found out, that, so men will have hormonal imbalances too. It's not just exclusive to women. And this is something that I think needs to be explored further, because I think we're noticing now how the fact women going through perimenopause and menopause are seeing an increase in OCD when maybe they thought they were fully healed from OCD in the past, and they've seen an uptick in their symptoms. Now they're in their perimenopause years, or they're going through menopause. It's definitely something I think that needs to be explored further, because this is not something that I wasn't prepared for myself now in my 40s. I'm 45 now, and I definitely saw an increase in my OCD after I had my 5th child, my 4th daughter, and she came along and just nothing went back the same. And I was definitely aware that there was changes, mentally and physically, there were changes, and it was a scary time because I'd been so well for so long with OCD and anxiety. I'd had a really great period of time when I I'd not been on medication and I'd been doing really well. It was just a real kind of shock for me to suddenly find myself in a time where everything just seemed to be back and seemed to be, stronger than ever. A lot of the intrusive thoughts I was having was so strong and forceful. It just felt so overwhelming and difficult because you find yourself in a place you didn't expect yourself to be back in. So I think it's being mindful that when those things happen, that there could be an actual cause for it. So that could be your menstrual cycle, it could be a hormonal imbalance, it could be perimenopause or menopause, and it's just being aware of those factors. And I think knowing that sometimes makes it easier to deal with, because there is a reason. Because sometimes when we don't know what's happening, it can be a scary place to be. Number 6 is sickness, and that might be sickness that you're going through. It might be sickness that a family member is going through. And this is something I have personal experience of, because myself, when I've been going through a hard time, maybe I've been physically unwell, and I will see a rise in OCD and anxiety, and that might be because of a lack of sleep. But you may have a family member or yourself, anyone that there might be a personal friend of yours, and if someone's going through a hard time with physical sickness, maybe they're going through something serious, we can tend to latch onto those things, and we become quite obsessive about it and research things that don't actually help us in the long run. We can try and figure everything out. And that's somewhere I've been personally with my mum when she's been ill, and my dad. They've had very serious health problems, and I can get quite obsessed about it. And because it's affected someone very close to me, it's scary. You want your loved ones to be safe and well. And that is something that's a theme that's ran through my journey with OCD throughout my life. It's always been protecting my loved ones, the people close to me. So sickness definitely does impact OCD and anxiety. It can raise our, we're on guard. We're just so alert to physical sickness and disease. We can find ourselves with health OCD. And this is something I have experienced throughout my life, kind of on and off. And at times more so than others, maybe because a loved one was going through something, or a friend. And it's difficult because we feel that pull, we feel that need to research something or figure something out and overanalyze something and give ourselves assurances and certainty that everything's going to be okay. And unfortunately, life doesn't work that way. And sometimes it's, for someone with OCD and anxiety, it's so overwhelming because that's all we crave. OCD is the doubting disorder, and we crave that ultimate certainty, and sometimes we can't have that. So it's about just not doing the unhelpful behaviour. It's changing our behaviour. We're not over excessively Googling things, and we're aware of when we're doing that. And if we do have intrusive thoughts about sickness and health, it's just letting those thoughts be there and not get so involved, because OCD wants your involvement. It craves your involvement and your attention. So the less we give it, the less it has to go on, and it will just fade on its own. Because when we give it involvement, we're giving it importance, and OCD will thrive on that, and it will make it much stronger and bigger, and it becomes a massive thing then. So it's just having that awareness that that's where you could be pulled down, and changing your behaviour. And it takes practice. It's not an easy thing. I'm saying all this, but it takes practice, and I hope my videos are helping you to see that healing is possible. Next one is going to be major incident. There's always national news about tragic occurrences, violent crimes, we may even see natural disasters, and these are major headline, grabbing articles. They grab your attention, and the thing is, these things are sad and upsetting as they are. These things do happen in life, and we can, obviously with OCD and anxiety, we can be pulled into it, and we can start fearing, for our safety in our lives. And it's just having that perspective over this, and knowing that as much as we hear about these things daily, and they can, because I think we feel like we hear these things more than ever now, and it's maybe there is an increase in certain crimes and things, and that may be true, but the more we obsess over it, the worse things will get. Our lives will just get so much smaller if we resist doing certain things because we're scared, or we're living in fear of something bad happening. And this is where I try to kind of not get so involved, because these things do happen and we can't have ultimate certainty, and it's just raising my tolerance to that, really. And it's not because you don't care, it's nothing to do with that. And I think, like I said earlier, OCD can make you feel quite guilty that you don't necessarily give into it, and that's just OCD's trick, though. OCD wants you to get pulled into it, and it wants to limit your life, to kind of control you, and that's just not a good place to be. It's not a good way to live your life, because your life becomes very small and you're not doing the things that you enjoy and the things you deserve to be doing in life. So as much as those things are upsetting as they are, we just have to have a different kind of perspective on it and not get so caught up and involved and obsessive over it. As hard as that is, just let those be there and move forward. It was as hard as it can be, and although we're doing that, that doesn't mean we have any less compassion or empathy for things going on in the world. The next one, number 8, is the death of a loved one. I mentioned this a little bit earlier because it's something I've dealt with myself personally, losing my mum a year and a half ago, and it's a major life-changing event. It's one thing that has changed my reality and my perspective on life exponentially. It's a major thing to go through, especially if you were very close to someone, as I was to my mum. I often wondered how I could survive without my mum, because ever since being a little girl, it's always been there. I don't know why, but part of my OCD, I guess, I've always been terrified of losing a loved one. That's been part of my OCD throughout the years, and it never really left me growing up. It was always there. I was always constantly aware of growing up that my mum had me at a slightly later age, nothing crazy old, she was 38, I think, but I've had children older than that. But at the time when I was younger, I was always very aware that I had older parents. My dad had me at 45, so he's 90 now, and I was very aware of this growing up, and it's something I think that carried through to my obsessions and compulsions, that I was trying to protect them. But it's a major life-changing event, and it's easy to see why you will see an increase in OCD symptoms, because suddenly you find yourself and life just doesn't look the same anymore, and we want to kind of relinquish some kind of control over life, and it doesn't happen by compulsions and rituals, and it's being kind to yourself again. It's a very difficult thing to go through, and grieving is a complicated process for anyone, and having that compassion that, this is a difficult thing, and to give yourself time to grieve properly and let yourself kind of experience it all, because grieving is hard. It's a very hard thing to go through. And with OCD, it has spiked and triggered certain things with me, but I've had to just let them be there. And I've actually found myself dealing with this better than I thought I would. And I think that goes for a lot with of people with OCD, that we can analyze and obsess over things for years on end. And actually, when you're faced with that situation, you handle it much better than you thought you ever would. And I'd say that goes for me with grief. And and not that it's not easy. Even for myself, it's been a hard process, and it's something that I probably will never get over. I don't think grief ever goes away. I just think it gets easier to live with. So, but being kind to myself and realizing, I can do this, and life is full of challenges. There's always going to be ups and there's always going to be downs. And those triggering thoughts I get, I have to let them be there. I have to let them be there. And if they do pull me in, that's okay. I can be kind to myself and see, well, okay, that's fine. You might have pulled me in this time, but next time, I'm aware of it and it's less likely to do the same again. But always be kind with yourself going through the loss of a loved one or a friend. It's a difficult thing, and it changes your whole reality, and just have that compassion for yourself that you really need, and be gentle, so gentle with yourself. The next one, number 9, is an accident of some kind. So it could be a car accident. These are difficult things. Driving for me, I've never done it. And that's always because I've had a fear of the fact that I could harm someone in a vehicle and it would be my fault. And the thought of living with that, for me growing up, was enough to put me off actually ever learning to drive. And in recent years, I've questioned whether, I should learn to drive, but to be honest, it's more about financial reasons now why I wouldn't do it. But, because I do like the idea of having the freedom with driving, but it you could see why if you had an accident, and maybe it wasn't a particularly serious accident, but it could really knock your confidence and really spark off some really difficult OCD behaviours, some intrusive thoughts, some compulsions, and checking, overly checking everything when you're driving. And, it's just, being aware of that. And it's difficult because accidents happen and most, aren't serious, but, we hear a lot about serious accidents every day and things that happen. So it's just being aware that and not getting so wrapped up in that. I'd be interested to hear from you guys if you actually drive and if that's ever been a factor for you with your OCD, because like I said, it's something that's actually put me off for a long time to drive for that reason. So I'd be interested to hear, because I know that driving can be a major factor for people with OCD and anxiety. So let me know in the comments. And number 10 is the last one. So I've got lots of experience in this, is pregnancy and childbirth. Pregnancy has been a major trigger for me with OCD and anxiety. And it's something that I've experienced 5 times, pregnancy and childbirth. But interestingly, I haven't had OCD in every single pregnancy. I've had it in, I would say, 3 out of the 5. To varying degrees, maybe 4 of the children, but it's been to varying degrees. Sometimes it's been terrible, where I've had to be under the community care for perinatal OCD and anxiety, or I've had to be in crisis care. It's gone to the other extreme, for postpartum OCD and anxiety, and I've been in the crisis care. So there's been definitely different variations to how I've suffered in pregnancy and childbirth and after. But it's definitely something that can trigger, because it affects all your hormones. So it's bound to be a factor with a rise in symptoms for your OCD and anxiety. So it's just being aware that these things can happen. And I think in pregnancy, I have been aware that on occasion that, this could happen again. And it's not that I've been on guard and waiting for it to happen. It's just, if it does, that I'm being more mindful about getting more sleep, you know, and resting more, not getting so caught up with triggers. And maybe that's why I haven't suffered as much in certain pregnancies more than the others, because I've been a lot more aware of the fact that I am getting triggered by certain things. But it's hard. It's really hard because, like I said, you're on a hormonal roller coaster in pregnancy and afterwards, and there's a lot of adjustment there, and you're going through new experiences, especially when I had my first child, and that was a major trigger for me with OCD. So yeah, it's difficult, and I really would say there's a lot more support out there now for mothers going through mental health issues, and they were amazing with me when I've needed the help in pregnancy and afterwards. So yeah, just know that there is help out there, and if you do find yourself struggling, that to get the support that you really do need. So I hope this video has given you a lot more insight today into potential triggers that could make your OCD and anxiety worse. Let me know in the comments if any of these things have in fact made your OCD and anxiety worse in the past, and let me know in the comments what your experience of that was like. So thanks for watching today, and I'll see you in the next video.